This is Brent Allen Winters, commonlawyer.com, www.commonlawyer.com. And this is a Common Lawyer Comments concerning our common law, our law of the land, as it is compared and contrasted with its ever-present antagonist on every continent and in every age, the law of the city. The law of the land versus the law of the city. And when it comes to the Constitution of the United States, it is a solid stepping stone in the history of our long history of our common law tradition. It's one of the solidest. It's a brief of common law government. It explains nothing. It uses no logic. It just states the fact of the matter. Again, a common law document is fact-oriented and process-oriented. It is not logic-oriented, and it is not result-oriented. You know, results and conclusions can be the result of logic, right? That's not what our common law is about. Our common law stresses fact. We don't ask juries, we want you to give us your logic, and then we want you to think this through according to the syllogism as set forth by the ancient Greeks and come to the right conclusion. We don't say that to them. Well, no. We just grab 5 fellows off the street that happen to be handy, and the first thing we say to them is, tell us who done it, how did he do it, why did he do it, where did he do it? Did he do it with malice aforethought, or did he just do it out of, just give us the facts, will you? Jury, just give us the facts, tell us what happened, and then deliver the verdict. That's all we want. That's what our common law wants, and did you know? Of course, you can see it. Our common law tradition has put into the ascendancy worldwide, the ascendancy of decency, prosperity unknown to mankind heretofore, enjoyment. Yep. Let's look at it. Common law of government. Our Constitution was written why? To govern us? No. Our Constitution, the militia of the several states called the people, ratified the Constitution to restrain and limit and govern those in government. Period. Well, Great Britain ruled. They made laws. They were made over across the pond in England. Were these laws good and wise? Answer, many of them were. And for a time, the colonies were perhaps better off than if they had entirely governed themselves, because though Great Britain did rule them, the colonies, Great Britain gave them protection by her fleets and did many things for their advantage. But afterwards, very unwise and unjust laws were made, as such as threatened to destroy all liberty in the colonies. Well, what happened? It was a mess. Like most things way up in government, in the deep state. Deep state. Where'd that phrase come from? The first mention in the English tongue of the words deep state came from the lips of King James I, of King James Bible fame. At his behest, this translation called the King James Bible was translated. He's the first man that we know of, we can find anywhere in the English tongue that used the words deep state. What did he say? He said, nobody has the right to know what goes on in the deep state. Yeah. I do what I want, and nobody has a right to question me. That's called the doctrine of divine right of kings. That's part of the law of the city. And I say, as much as I love this book, this King James Bible, let's get real. This was only translated for one reason, to advance the law of the city doctrine, divine right of kings, to say that kings answer to nobody, and nobody gets to know what goes on in the deep state. Well, you know what I think about that? The H-E-double-L with that doctrine. Is there something wrong with saying that? No. That means cast it into hell. I don't want it. It gets too deep, too ugly, too perverted. Really? Really? You want that? Not you. I'm talking about all these people that voted, didn't vote for Donald John, DJ. What are you thinking? That's just it. Their brains aren't engaged in a way that they're doing too much. And that's not that they don't think. They're thinking wrong. Let's get on with this. The deep state we talked about. Well, the King of England said, I'm emperor in all of my colonies, the empire throughout the world, India, Pakistan, all those kind of places, America, up in Canada, I am emperor. But in England, I'm common law king. That means I have limits, but not over there. I'm emperor. Go read the documents. It'll say King of England, Ireland, Scotland, emperor of his imperial empire. Well, if he's emperor, that means the common law doesn't apply. That's law of the city talk. That's dictatorship type stuff. By the way, that's why Britain tolerated and indeed encouraged slavery of African slaves in America. And, by the way, don't kid yourself, white slaves from England and Scotland and Ireland. And there were as many or more of those in those early days than there were African slaves. All over the Caribbean islands, which the British controlled, many of them, and even in America. Yeah, slavery. You know, there was a famous Gary Cooper movie. I don't remember the name of it. Gary Cooper, you remember him. He played the hero, and then he was a rich fellow that was in the colonies before our country started, officially as an independent country. And the story is all about him purchasing a British girl who was enslaved and ended up marrying her. She was sold into slavery and sent to the colonies. Michael Hoffman wrote a book called They Were White and They Were Slaves, all about the slave trade in the new world of white slaves. Don't let the deep state hornswoggle you into thinking that your ancestors, if you're white, weren't slaves too. They were. They were harvested regularly all over Europe, and the Jewish slave traders in France made a point of it and selling them into the Arab world way back centuries ago. By the time we get to the American colonies, the slave traders were selling them into the New World. The Highland clearances in Scotland, the Scottish Highland chiefs sold out their own people to get wealthy, sold the land. The people were starving and sold themselves into slavery by the thousands. The Scots. Highland clearances. That's what they called it. And then by the, what do they call it down in England? It had a different name, but it was the same idea. The English people were displaced that worked the land. The Enclosure Acts of Parliament, Enclosure Acts. They were on the coast. They would run to the coast of England and Scotland starving, didn't know what to do. They'd look for a way to get on a ship, and they'd ship them to it. They'd sell themselves. That's where they could go to sell themselves, just like you can go to, used to be able to go to places in San Diego and hire illegal aliens to work for you. Oh, people go there, they fly in airplanes, pick them up by the plane load, take them to the ranches in Utah and Nevada. I knew men that did that, but they didn't enslave them, but it was the same idea. They knew if there were places they could go on the coast, there would be ships there and men willing to buy them so they wouldn't starve. And they were shipped off to the sugar cane plantations, a lot of them in the Caribbean, and worked with the African slaves. And that's where the word redneck comes from, because the African slaves called them rednecks, because their necks, they'd bent over working in the fields with them. Their necks would get red. They called the African slaves' necks wouldn't get red, you see, so they distinguished themselves. Red clay man, you know, there it is. Well, listen, I have a sister-in-law who got to America because her ancestor was a slave from Scotland, sold into the Caribbean, ended up coming to America, rejected because he was Scottish. He bought his way out of it somehow. Married a Cherokee girl or a Choctaw, I forget which it was. My sister-in-law's mother lived on the reservation there in North Carolina, Tennessee, wherever that thing is there in the mountains, near Elizabethan, I think it is. This is common. We're lied to constantly. If you don't listen to us for any other reason, Brent might tell you something that is true. He might. I have a penchant for it. I've been trying to find the truth all of my life. It's been hard. I've spent a fortune. Oh, yeah, and went into deep debt because I wanted to know. Here I am now, sitting in a little enclosed place out in the middle of nowhere, trying to teach what I've learned. I appreciate you coming here, but again, I ask you, support us, and we'll keep going. We don't want you to get nothing for what we do here and just send money. You send money, we'll give you something in appreciation. We've got a lot of books that I've written, and even a translation of the Bible. If you're in 5 volumes with over 35,000 footnotes translated from the original tongues, I call it toward a raw translation. I don't want to cook the book. The good book uncooked, we call it, the winterized version. Oh, the laws were okay, but they were the civil law. They were increasingly putting the admiralty law, the martial law, all civil law, all law of the city, as contrasted with the law of the land, is martial law. What did the colonies do then? Colonies. What did the colonies do then? They made complaints and reasoned for a long time with Great Britain. That means Parliament and the King, King George III, trying to persuade her to act more justly. She didn't. Question number 22. Did Great Britain listen to their complaints and repeal those bad laws? Answer: no. But instead of that, sent over ships and soldiers to force us to obey them. Now, if you read the Declaration of 76, it's a common law complaint. The complaint, just like you go to court, it's a common law complaint. But the jury, in this case, and it says so right in the document, is before a candid world is the jury. And we write these things in this Declaration of 76 before a candid world. Candid? That means open. We're not hiding anything. Here's what Great Britain has done to us. Let me recite some of the things from our Declaration of 76. They have ravished our coasts. They have burned our towns. They have sent foreign mercenaries here to kill us. The Hessians. They hired them. They were mercenaries. King George III was a German prince, and he contracted with himself to hire them, and he made money from the English people doing it. They were a tough bunch, tough customers. The only thing you could do with them is kill them. They were committed to their martial crafts of killing. And we did. Some of them defected. Did you know, for example, see, they wore blue coats, the Hessians. The English wore red coats. So it was the red and the blue, see. The Hessians that would defect to the colonies, and a lot of them did, they didn't want people to think they were Hessians, and they didn't have any other clothes, so they'd turn their clothes inside out, and they'd wear them wrong side out, so you couldn't see their blue coats when they served with the Americans. So the Americans got to calling them turncoats. That's where that word and that understanding of the word came from in America, the turncoats. They turned their coats inside out, put them on, and fought with the Americans. So if their Hessian brothers saw them, it would have been, oh, if they ever got a hold of them, see. So they just turned their coats inside out, didn't have anything else to wear. The Continental Army didn't have enough money to buy them any clothes. They were starving. Oh, boy, Congress provided plenty of powder and lead balls for the Continental, and even rifles for the Continental Army. The only thing they didn't provide was food, almost none. And this is what happens in war. This is the reality of the matter. It's never pretty. They said things like this, of course, didn't bother them. They had plenty to eat. They said, listen, the more hungry these fellows are, the harder they're going to fight. They're going to get ticked off. And we want them to think the British did this, not us. And that's the way they worked it. That's politics, friends. Were they ticked? You better believe they were ticked. They fought like wild banshees. Well, verse 23, and did we obey the laws that Britain, Great Britain, put on us. No, the people of the colonies consulted with each other what was to be done, and at length took up arms. That means they armed themselves with guns. They raised such armies as they could. That's their militia. And though they had few soldiers, no experienced officers, and but little money, they carried on a war against the whole power of Great Britain, and having, with aid from France, forced 2 British armies to lay down their arms and surrender themselves prisoners to the Americans, who at length compelled Great Britain to acknowledge their independence. Well, I like Stansbury, of course. I want to take umbrage with some of his facts here. It says here, they raised such armies as they could. That's right. And though they had few soldiers, that's right. No experienced officers, that's wrong. That's incorrect. The Americans had some experienced officers that had been pretty tough fighters. George Washington. These are veterans of that horrible war that we, along with we were Brits at that time, we had with France. George Washington, as I told you, was a blue blood from England. His family, his grandpa fled. His grandpa fled England to keep from getting his head chopped off because his side lost the war. He supported the crown and the divine right of kings. He was uppity, big shot. And they were warring against Parliament. The Puritans controlled Parliament. The Puritans defeated the crown. And all those fellows that supported the crown, they hightailed her across the pond to the New World and settled in primarily Virginia. Virginia has always been an uppity place. My brother is a graduate of the United States Naval Academy. And so he was running with the big dogs. He got out from under the porch with all us other dogs, and he was running with the big dogs. And he was down there in Virginia. I forget what he was doing there. He was a naval officer. Oh, he was on an airplane. I remember the story. He said he got on an airplane to leave someplace down there, and there was a woman sitting beside him and got to talking to her, and she was from an old Virginia family, a blue blood. And they enjoyed having a conversation, and she was real friendly. She said, look, if you're ever back in town, call my husband and I, and gave my brother her husband's business card. And I don't remember what it was my brother said to her after that, thanks. And he said something, gave her some comment that made her realize he wasn't in her class. And he had the card in his hand, he was holding it, and she just reached over and just put her fingers on it, just snatched it out of his hand like that, put it back in her purse, and turned her head toward the window and didn't say nothing else to him. Yeah, I know a fella graduated from the United States Military Academy, West Point, did a couple of tours in Vietnam and graduated in 1967, went overseas, dodged bullets, took incoming rounds and gave some, I should say, for a long time, boots on the ground, came back and wanted to join. He was in Virginia. He was not from there, but he ended up settling there, wanted to join the Virginia National Guard as an officer, of course. Combat hardened, toughened, West Point engineer, did well in his class. They wouldn't let him join. Yeah. He said, well, I'm qualified. Why can't I join? They said, because here in Virginia, we have a waiting list. We give preference to the sons of old Virginia. If your family been here a while, you get to join and everybody else has to wait unless we need you. Well, he ended up leaving the state and going someplace else because he was so acclimated. He wanted to have a military to be part of his life. I think he went to Oklahoma. They're not as uppity there, you know. That's Virginia. Well, George Washington was from there, and he got ticked off because he was in the British Army during the French and Indian War, but the British officer corps and the British Army slighted him over and over and over. Why? Well, even though he's from a uppity family from old England, George Washington, he was now a colonist. And they overlooked him and overlooked him and overlooked him. They did not give him the same respect that they did English officers. You can read about it. Did you ever wonder why he was so committed to fighting them? That's why, my friends, personal affronts will drive men, lack of respect will drive men to get that respect any way they can. Don't ever forget it, ladies. And men, don't ever forget that a woman wants foremost love, and she'll do anything to get it. Anything. Look out. Katie, bar the door. Men are that way about respect. Women are that way about love. Oh, women want respect too, but they want love first and foremost. Men want love too, but that's not what drives them. It's the respect that drives them. Why did Andy Jackson slaughter the British in New Orleans? I mean, he slaughtered them. Only had a couple of casualties. I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 at the most. Shot and killed 1,200 British soldiers. Didn't hesitate. Spent his life doing that. Why? Because the British personally insulted him when he was 14 years old, a prisoner during our war for independence. He was a prisoner with his brothers who were older. One stupid, and when I say stupid, I mean stupid, British officer demanded that Andy shine his boots, and he told him to go to H-E-double-L. That's the quote. British officer whips out his sword, swings it at him. Andy throws his arm up, slices him across here, slices him across here. Do you think you'd ever forget that? He never forgot it. And he was jumping at a chance. His ambition was driven by one thing, to get back at the British. To get back at the British. That's why he did what he did. That's history, friends. That's reality. You offend a woman, she feels unloved. What do you get? A queen like Bloody Mary. Burnt at least 300 Christians at the stake, many of them early Bible translators. That's what she couldn't stand. But really, what was behind it? She felt unloved. Her father rejected her, Henry VIII. Slighted. Andy Jackson, George Washington. Oh, we had experienced officers, and we had tough men. We just didn't have many of them, and we didn't have supplies like the British did, but we whooped them because supplies don't win wars. Supplies don't win wars. What wins wars? The men that fight them. An unwillingness to quit. Not always. The rider, says the Bible, prepares the horse for battle, but victory is of Yehovah. He's the one that gives the victory. Just remember that. You need to be ready. We're supposed to be ready. God commands us to be ready, militiamen. But keep in mind to trust your maker. Keep your powder dry. This is Brent Allen Winters, commonlawyer.com, www.commonlawyer.com, commonlawyer.com. Miss Francine, you remember this bag, don't you? We took that to a conference in Idaho once, and Miss Francine went with us. I liked it very much that she went. But I took this, and I've had it ever since. I haven't used it much, but I thought I'll hang it up back here so people can see. Of course, it says it on the screen, too, doesn't it, down the corner? Yeah, commonlawyer.com. I see it down there. Go to the website, commonlawyer.com, and take advantage of what we have there. Support us. Join us. Be part of who we are. Be part. Listen, DJ Trump has said that our common law tradition is something we need to revitalize. Was he wrong? Of course he wasn't wrong. I find a kindred spirit there. Whatever else he does, I find a kindred spirit there. I want you to find it too. It's a Christian tradition. It is our Christian tradition. It is the Christian tradition. Commonlawyer.com. Go to the website, take advantage of what's there, support us.